Hey there, everyone. It's your good friend Eric Thompson. It's the Leading Edge Podcast, episode number 60, which is a fun milestone. This one is called Fearless, with a very intentional question mark at the end of that title. Hey, speaking of milestones, pretty cool. We just blew right past 7,000 downloads. We're actually much closer to 7,500 than 7,000. So that's amazing and awesome. And I just want to say thank you so much for all of your engagement with this podcast, with all the nice comments and feedback that I get. It's pretty darn cool. I'm so grateful for that. Okay, speaking of fear, you all should know. And I shared this with my Mindset Mastermind group just the other day. That group is called Alpha State. And I said to them, I said, you know what? For me, right now, comfort is like nowhere to be found. The things I'm doing in my business, things I'm doing with my coaching and training, all the things that I have happening, like comfort isn't around. There's way more fear than comfort. And I mean that in a very positive, constructive way. It's all good. It's super healthy. I mean that in a very healthy way. But comfort is not arriving. Comfort's not in the room right now, is it, based on the things that I'm doing. And you know what? I love it. It makes me feel exhilarated and alive and really powerful and motivated and all those really positive things. All right. So why are we talking about fear? This title of this podcast, again, is called Fearless, with a super intentional question mark at the end. Why are we talking about fear? Well, you know why? This is important. All right. Fear, it turns out, is a huge deal in people's life. It's a huge motivator. It's a huge driver of things that they do and things that they don't do. What I see, what I notice, what I've seen in myself in my past is people spend a whole lot of their life trying to avoid fear, or at least trying to reduce it. All right, it's just a massive motivator, right? They do all they can to keep fear at bay, right? Keep it out of their life, right? We can probably remember times where we've done that. We may be doing it right now. We may be able to think about other people who are doing the same thing, right? We try our best to keep fear out of our life. So it's like people have this fear of fear. Isn't that kind of interesting, right? People get scared of being scared. And so what happens as a result is they miss out on seeing all the benefits of fear, and also miss out on understanding that fear can be a really good thing, and fear is a reality, and trying to keep it out of our life is so not realistic, right? That's not going to happen, all right? Fear is going to show up. That's just the deal. Me doing this podcast was inspired by two things that happened recently. One is in Alpha State, in that Mindset Mastermind that I host. We've been talking about self-confidence, right? So we've been doing all kinds of lessons and strategies on how to build self-confidence. And I made the point that sometimes we confuse self-confidence for being something that will eliminate fear. So we think that finally, if I can just finally get myself confident, if I can be super self-confident, then all the fear will go away. Well, that doesn't happen, right? So being self-confident does not mean that you've eliminated all the fear. Like you can have both of those going at the same time. I think about me when I'm presenting on stage, when I'm presenting to a group of people. I'm confident in that moment. I'm confident in the outcomes that people will get. I'm confident that I'm going to be fine, that I'm going to be okay, right? That nothing terrible is going to happen to me, even though it's uncomfortable stepping into it. I know that I'm going to be just fine. I know that people are going to get some great outcomes. I'm confident in that, and I feel fear at the same time. I feel uncomfortable at the same time because I'm really putting myself out there, right? So confidence does not eliminate fear. So that was inspiration number one for this podcast. Number two, inspiration. This is pretty cool. There's a really amazing guy that I work with one-on-one. I coach him one-on-one. And one of the things that I do when I coach people is I have people fill out their life list. Definitely inspired by ninja selling, the fact that I do this with people that I coach. And so a life list is when people fill out things that they want to do, have, and be in their life. And he put down as a to have, he put down to have a life without fear. And I thought, wow, how fascinating, how interesting. And also bravo, kudos to him for being so transparent, right? For being so open about that. That is, I thought that was super courageous for him to say that. And again, it just really fascinated me. And I started to think about how many other people, if they were asked, and they were asked to be open and sincere like he was, would say the same thing. I think a lot of people would say the same thing, that their dream would be to have a life without fear. And on the surface, that seems so reasonable, right? It's so understandable for someone to have that dream, have that wish to have a life without fear. On the surface, I think it makes a ton of sense. So he and I had a really cool conversation about that. And I'll tell you one thing I shared with him that I think will be beneficial to you if have ever felt the same way, that you also would like to have a life without fear. I know I felt that way for sure until I really understood the benefits of fear. So here's what I shared with him. Here's this really cool metaphor that I did not come up with. All right, I need to give credit where credit is due. It's Brooke Castillo, who I learned this metaphor from. She gets the credit. She's one of my mentors. So here's how the metaphor goes. Imagine, if you will, a buffet, all right? Imagine a whole buffet spread out before you, and this happens to be a buffet of feelings. So how this metaphor goes is, from this point forward in your life, however old you are going to get to feel the feelings that you select from this buffet, all right? So you have this whole buffet of feelings that's laid out before you. So there are things like courageous and empowered and motivated and inspired and clear and confident, right? There's all those kinds of things laid out before you. There are things like happy, joyful, loved, all of those kind of things. Comfortable is a feeling. And also there are things like sad is there. And so here the point is, all these feelings, you can take whatever feeling you want, you can leave whatever feeling you want behind, but whatever you take, those are going to be the ones that you are going to get to feel for the rest of your life. And anything that you leave behind, you'll never ever get to feel again. And it's kind of interesting, right? Kind of interesting to think about. All right, what would I take? What would I leave behind? Would I leave anything behind? Like even sad? Like, would you leave sad behind? Probably not when you think about it. Like, you'll be standing there in front of sad. You'd be like, all right, am I going to take this? Do I really want to feel sad? Then what you're going to realize is, you know what? There are times in my life where it's totally appropriate to feel sad. Like if I'm at a funeral, it's going to be appropriate to feel sad in that moment. I'm actually going to want to feel sad because that's exactly the kind of feeling that would be the right thing to feel in that kind of moment. Even frustrated, right? There are times where I'm going to want to feel frustrated because frustrated can spur on other actions for me, right? So you get it. So, obviously you're going to take the positive ones and you're going to give some thought to the negative ones. You're probably going to take the negative ones because there are moments in your life where you will want to actually access that feeling. You're going to want to have that feeling come up, all right? Pretty cool metaphor, right? Isn't it kind of interesting to think about? And it's really all those things that are on the buffet that make life. I mean, that's really what life is about, all those things on the buffet. But check it out. Here's my point. Eventually, you're going to get to the part of the buffet where fear is sitting there, right? So fear is sitting there as an emotion. Are you going to take it? Now, what I also want to suggest, it's the little asterisks here. Let's pretend there's two kinds of fear. There's emotional fear and physical fear. I think those are two different things. Let's at least agree that they're different. There are things that may make you feel physically scared, a fear of heights, for instance. We're not talking about that. Put that one aside, that's a different podcast. Let's talk about emotional fear, right? We're just going to talk about emotional fear. So maybe, when I talked about being on stage before, so maybe the kind of fear you would feel if you were public speaking. I'm talking about that kind of fear. So emotional fear. So there it is, sitting there on the buffet. Would you take it? Would you take fear? And you would probably stand there for a couple minutes, right? You probably would contemplate and wonder and consider, all right, am I going to take that? And maybe initially, just like we mentioned before, your reaction is going to be to leave it behind. I mean, maybe you too are saying that I would like to have a life without fear. But would you really leave it behind? Right? Is that something really you would leave behind? All right. And so here's the thing. I think you would come to this conclusion after a little bit of consideration, maybe after talking it through. If maybe you have some friends there with you going through the same buffet, maybe you guys would talk it through, and maybe you would kind of mull it over in your mind. And what I believe is you would decide to take it. And the conclusion you would come to, you would say, you know what? Fear has benefits. There are a whole lot of benefits coming from being scared. And again, initially you may be like, what are you talking about? Fear has no benefits. I'd rather not feel it. Well, what I want you to do, I want you to think about a time where you were scared, but you did it anyway, right? Is there a time where you can think about that you were really scared, but you know what? You did it anyway, right? So it may be a kind of certain presentation that you did, right? So maybe it was you public speaking, you making a presentation. Maybe it was meeting with a big client, right? Maybe it was a seller who you were going to sell a property at a price point where you've never sold that kind of thing before. Maybe it was asking someone out on a date. Maybe you're going way back to like middle school. Like there was a dance, right? The middle school dance, and you had to ask someone to that dance, right? We can all think about times where we were scared, but you know what? We did it anyway. And then think about knowing that you were scared. What did that fear provide to you? Like, what were the benefits that you got out of being scared? Well, you know what? There are all kinds of benefits that you got from being scared. And if you hadn't have been scared, you wouldn't have felt these things, or you wouldn't have realized these benefits. So a few that I think about, one is adrenaline. So literally what happens like chemically in your body when you're scared is you get a shot of adrenaline through the system. And that, in those moments, that is helpful, right? That is super helpful. It's good to have adrenaline flowing when you're about to ask the girl to the dance, when you're about to step on stage, right? It's good to have that adrenaline flowing, right? Because adrenaline, it makes you more aware, right? It gets your eyes wide open. It gets your senses tingling, right? You're there, you're fully present in the moment. You're able to shut out the other things, like there you are, right? Game on. So that's another benefit in my mind, is you get your game face, right? You get your game face on from being scared. You can think about when you're scared and you do it anyway. That's when you got your game face on, right? That's when you're like, okay, here we go. I got my game face on. I'm stepping into this. Bring it. Another thing it gives you after the fact is it gives you a ton of pride. So think of the pride that you get from being scared and doing it anyway. So you get that huge payoff right after, and for many, many moments down the road after, as you think back on that time where you were scared and do it anyway. So that, like, you can always access that pride of thinking about, oh my gosh, there I was in that moment being super scared, like even scared out of my mind. But look at me, I did it anyway. That makes me feel so proud. The other benefit it gives, and this one's pretty cool when you think about it, is it gives inspiration, right? It gives inspiration for others because others are watching you do something that is scary, but doing it anyway. And do you know what that's called? That's called courage. So other people watch you being courageous, all right? And what I would say, that's the definition of courage, is when you're scared and you do it anyway. And when people witness courage, that, my friends, is a really cool thing. There's actually some fascinating research around this, is what happens to people when they witness courage, when they witness people doing the right thing versus doing the wrong thing, like what happens internally in their body, like all this really fascinating research. So you give people the benefit of inspiration, you give people the benefit of witnessing your courage. That is pretty darn cool. A quick story that came to mind as I was putting this together is our wedding. All right, so Julie and I got married. I think it's been about 17 years ago. My gosh, I should know that by heart, but give or take. Forgive me, Julie, if you're listening to this. And she has a really good friend from growing up, right? So we got married in Colorado. Julie grew up in upstate New York. She has a very good friend who still lives in upstate New York who has a fear of flying. All right. She doesn't like to fly. All right. All respect to her, props to her. Some people are scared of that. I have a fear of heights. She has a fear of flying. All good. And so we were concerned, and Julia was concerned that maybe she wouldn't be able to make it to our wedding because that's far away, right? That's a long way to drive. It'd be like 3 or 4 days to drive. And Julie was cool about it. She said, she may not want to come to our wedding because it's so far away. That's a super long drive. And she let her friend off the hook. She's like, hey, I get it. If you don't want to come, I get it. It's a long drive. Sure, I'll miss you for sure, but I get it if you don't want to come. But you know what that friend did? She did it anyway. She got on a plane. She was scared and she did it anyway. And it was just so cool because she did it for Julie. She did it because of the friendship, because she did it because of the history, right? She put her own fears in second place above the fact or below the fact that she was really good friends with Julie. Then she wanted to be there. So that was inspirational, right? That was cool to see her courage, the fact that she got on that plane, flew out to Colorado for our wedding, did it anyway. She was scared and did it anyway, just for Julie, just to be there for our wedding. All right, so that's just an example, right, of what happens when people watch you being scared and doing it anyway. What I'll tell you guys, for me right now, one thing that I happen to be working on as I'm recording this podcast is a coaching certification program, all right? So this is a way for someone in a leadership role within a real estate brokerage, or they may be their own real estate coach. They have a coaching business, or maybe they aspire to have their own coaching business one day. I'm creating a certification program where someone can be certified as a master real estate coach. And for me to do this, oh my goodness, I am having to put myself out there, right? So put myself out there in terms of promoting it, letting people know about it, putting it together, putting all the content together. It's been in my mind for 4 years. You know why I haven't done it? Because I've been scared to do it, right? But now I'm scared and I'm doing it anyway, right? So I am scared about this, but I am doing it anyway. And I'm watching how fired up people are getting to be a part of this. Like the reaction is even better than I ever imagined. Like people are like so sincerely excited to be a part of this small group that I'm putting together. And it feels so good to be scared and be doing it anyway. All right, so here's what we're left with. What do we do with fear? What do we do with it? How are we going to handle fear? And let's start with the things that we can't do, all right? So let's just get real here. Let's understand there are a few things that are impossible, things that we cannot do as it relates to fear, all right? So we need to own these things. We need to just understand it, accept it, stop pretending that these aren't true, and starting with how about eliminate, all right? So we cannot eliminate fear. As much as we may like to, or much, again, on the surface, that may seem like a good idea, it may seem appealing, well, we can't eliminate it. It's not going to go away because guess what? We've taken it from the buffet. We didn't have the buffet choice. It's there. We got the all-inclusive package, right? Where all the feelings are there. We don't have the chance to do this a la carte and pick and choose. It's there, right? We got the all-inclusive, so we can't eliminate it. We also, as we thought this through, we realized that we actually don't even want to. So even if we could, we wouldn't want to eliminate it. We would actually still take it off the buffet. All right, so we can't eliminate it. We also cannot ignore it, right? We can't ignore fear because fear, when it shows up, right? So it is a feeling we get in our body that cannot be ignored. There are like literally chemical reactions going on inside of us when it shows up, and it turns out you can't ignore that, right? So we're not going to put our head in the sand about it. We're not going to pretend it's not there. We're not going to put our fingers in our ears and say la 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 and pretend that we don't notice it. Fear is there. We can't ignore it, and also we can't avoid it, right? We cannot avoid fear, and we don't want to avoid fear. And for sure, if you're listening to this, if you're someone who is engaging with this, if you're someone who has helped me blow right past 7,000 downloads, you're not someone who is going to want to avoid it because you are on the pursuit of things that are amazing and cool and making incredible contributions, right? You got big dreams. You want to level up, right? Do even bigger things in your life, make even bigger contributions, make an even bigger difference, be just more of a person. That's why you're listening to this in the first place. And so what you understand then is avoiding fear isn't the way to go down that path, right? That's a different path of avoiding fear. That's a different podcast that someone else hosts. What you realize, because you're here, you realize that fear is actually, it's the currency, all right? So fear is the currency in the pursuit of our big goals and our big dreams, all right? So we can't eliminate it, we can't ignore it, we can't avoid it, nor would we want to. So then what do we do with it? Well, so check it out. 4 things that I came up with. Things to do with fear. We welcome it. What? Yes, we welcome it because, again, it's the currency, right? So when it shows up, you're like, oh, welcome. Welcome to the show. Hello, fear. It means I'm onto something. When fear is showing up here in the room, you actually put out the welcome mat for it. You befriend it. You befriend it. I think of the metaphor of like a wild horse. So we've all seen several different movies. I can't think of one specifically, but think of a movie, where there was it's like a Wild West kind of movie, or it's based, back in the day in the West, and they're cowboys and cowgirls, women and men who are living that life, and there's some wild horse that gets put in a pen, right? And no one can ride it, no one can tame it, but along comes someone who can do it. Right, there's a woman who's able to figure it out and able to communicate with that horse and tame that horse. I think of the same thing, right? So it's like, that's like fear, right? It's like that wild horse bucking around, but you actually befriend it, you tame it, just like you would a wild maverick horse, right? And you make it your ally, right? So you actually befriend fear. You develop this great relationship with it, where you see it as your ally, because again, you're onto something when it is arriving, right? So you can befriend it and you can actually ride it like a wild horse, right? You can tame it that way. So then what happens when you have that kind of relationship with it, you actually seek it. And you're like, what are you talking about? No, we started with how to have a life without fear. Well, and now you're saying to seek it? Yeah, you seek it because it is, again, it's the currency. You're onto something. So you're looking for opportunities to go make yourself scared. All right. Not in an irrational or irresponsible way, but you're looking for those opportunities where you're really going to put yourself out there. Like, okay, I know I'm going to be doing something cool. I know I'm going to be onto something. I need to go push myself. I need to go get the fear running in a really positive, healthy way. I need to get that adrenaline flowing. You actually seek it. And then the last thing that I think about is you see it. You see fear for what it is. All right. So you see fear for what it is. You know what it is? All that it is, it's just a sensation in your body. That's all it is. Like, what is fear? Like, if you had to explain fear to someone that didn't understand it, like I don't know, like a Martian, Martian lands on planet Earth and you're trying to explain fear to a Martian, what would you say? We'd say, well, I guess my heart races a little bit faster, and I guess my palms sweat a little bit, and my skin kind of tingles, and my pupils dilate a little bit, and I'm fully present, fully aware. That's fear. They would say, fascinating, interesting, cool. And it would kind of end there, right? So that's my point, is that's all it is. So can we handle that? Like, can we handle our heart racing a little bit, and our skin tingling a little bit, and our pupils dilating and feeling super present and aware? Like, can we deal with that? I think we can, right? I think we can all deal with that sensation in our body, because that's all it is. All right, guys. So again, we talked about being fearless, but where we ended up is we said that fear actually has super benefits, right? Amazing amount of benefits. And so we know we can't eliminate it or ignore or avoid it. So what we end up doing, we end up actually welcoming it and befriending it and using it as our ally, and also seeing it for what it is. So I hope that this podcast was helpful as you think about fear and your relationship with fear. I wish you all the best. I wish you great progress, great thinking as you process through everything that we talked about here. Hey, if you want more things like this, if you want some daily coaching, if you want to work on your own mindset, this is the perfect thing for real estate professionals. It's the Alpha State Mastermind. Go check out alphastateclass.com. Get signed up, get in there. You can stay as long as you want, like zero risk. We do some pretty cool things there. People are getting some pretty amazing results. So hope to see you in there. And in the meantime, enjoy life on the leading edge. We'll see you in the next podcast.